Imagine this for a second. You're holding a penny so ordinary it's probably been ignored, dropped, maybe even cursed as pocket change, a broken bar, and yet that single copper-colored coin could quietly be worth more than a luxury home, more than a lifetime of paychecks, more than most people will ever see sitting in one place. Now here's the unsettling part. This penny has already passed through millions of American hands. It may have been in your change, it may still be in a jar, and most people who touched it had no idea what they were holding. This is the true story behind the 2009 D-Mint mark Lincoln 1 cent, a coin born during America's bicentennial tribute to Abraham Lincoln, a year flooded with billions of pennies, a broken bar, and yet hiding a microscopic few that rewrote the rules of what a worthless penny really means. One of them shattered expectations, stunned professional graders, and climbed toward a market value near $962,000. Yes, for a penny. And before you laugh, ask yourself a simple question: how closely have you ever looked at your change? In 2009, the U.S. Mint did something it had never done before. To honor 200 years since Lincoln's birth, 4 entirely different penny designs were released, each telling a chapter of Lincoln's life, from his humble log cabin beginnings, to his years as a young man, to his professional rise, and finally to the presidency that changed the nation forever. Collectors noticed, the public noticed, production exploded. Denver struck hundreds of millions of these coins, and that's where the story quietly split in two, because when massive numbers collide with human hands, pressure, machinery, and speed, perfection becomes rare, extremely rare. Somewhere inside that flood of 2009 D Lincoln cents, a handful of coins emerged that were not just different, but historically different. Coins with minting characteristics so unusual that even veteran numismatists paused, leaned closer, and said, "This shouldn't exist." At first, nobody noticed. These pennies spent just like any other: coffee shops, grocery stores, gas stations, maybe even a tip jar or two. Imagine the irony: a coin capable of buying a mansion, tossed beside a crumpled receipt. If coins could talk, this one would probably scream. Then came the moment every collector dreams about: a routine submission, a quiet evaluation, a microscope hovering over Lincoln's familiar face. And suddenly, the room changed. What appeared ordinary at arm's length became extraordinary up close. Unusual metal composition traces, striking anomalies inconsistent with standard 2009 Denver production. Details too sharp in some areas, too distorted in others, alignment characteristics that simply didn't match known tolerances. This wasn't damage, this wasn't wear, this was a mint-born anomaly that slipped through when nobody was looking. And here's where the story takes a turn that should make you uneasy, because the coin didn't scream its value, it whispered. No bright color, no obvious flaw, no cartoonish mistake. Just subtle markers only visible to someone who knew exactly what to look for. Which raises a dangerous question: how many people already spend one like this without ever knowing? As word spread quietly through elite collecting circles, demand ignited. Not the loud kind, the serious kind. Private offers, silent negotiations, experts debating authenticity and rarity behind closed doors. This wasn't hype. This was fear. Fear that another example might surface, fear that the opportunity might disappear, fear that someone else would recognize what you missed. When the valuation numbers surfaced, jaws dropped, not because pennies don't sell for high prices, rare cents always have, but because this was modern. 2009 feels like yesterday, a coin younger than your smartphone, suddenly approaching a valuation near $962,000. It challenged a deeply held belief that only ancient or century-old coins can create life-changing wealth, and that belief cracked wide open. Now pause for a second. Be honest. If I handed you a handful of pennies right now, would you look at them differently, or would you say, "It's just a penny," and move on? That casual dismissal is exactly how fortunes are lost every single day. But this story isn't just about metal and money, it's about timing, about attention, about recognizing opportunity while it's still quiet. The 2009 Lincoln cent exists at a dangerous intersection, old enough to be overlooked, new enough to be underestimated, and hiding in plain sight inside collections, jars, drawers, and inherited boxes labeled nothing important. And yes, let's inject a moment of reality here. Most 2009 pennies are worth 1 cent, some are worth a few dollars, a few are worth much more. And an almost mythical fraction sit in a category so rare that even seasoned collectors may never see one in person. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Every verified 6-figure and 7-figure coin started life as just another coin, including this one. What transformed it was knowledge meeting patience. Someone didn't rush, someone didn't assume, someone asked, "What if?" And that single question separated pocket change from generational wealth. Funny how a penny can teach a lesson Wall Street never does. As excitement builds, urgency follows, because once a rarity becomes widely recognized, the window narrows. Prices don't wait politely, they jump, they spike, and they leave latecomers staring at charts saying, "I almost had one." The smart money isn't loud, it's early. Right now, people across the country are re-examining their 2009 Lincoln cents. Magnifiers are coming out, submissions are increasing, grading services are paying attention, and the clock is ticking, not because the coin will disappear, but because opportunity does, quietly, without warning. Imagine the emotional whiplash of discovering that the penny you dismissed for years could fund your retirement, pay off your home, or rewrite your family's future. It sounds dramatic until it happens to someone else, and then suddenly it sounds real. And here's the final cliffhanger, the one that should linger with you long after this video ends. The confirmed high-value specimen isn't believed to be alone. Experts agree more exist, they just haven't been identified yet. Which means somewhere, right now, another 2009 Lincoln cent with the same extraordinary characteristics is waiting, in a jar, in a drawer, in a forgotten envelope, maybe even within reach. So the next time you hear that familiar clink of copper, don't rush, don't assume, because history has already proven something unsettling. One penny changed everything, and the next one hasn't been found yet. Pulling out a single penny, and realizing it could be the difference between your current life and a future defined by freedom, security, and choice. Not a gold bar, not a lottery ticket, a penny. Specifically, a 2009 Mint Mark Professional Lincoln 1 cent. The kind of coin most people wouldn't bend down to pick up. And yet, one verified example shocked the collecting world with a valuation climbing toward $954,000. Let that sink in for a moment. If your heart just skipped a beat, good, it should, because what you're about to hear is not a fairy tale. It's a documented collision of history, precision, rarity, and human oversight. And somewhere out there, possibly in your own home, this story may not be finished yet. In 2009, the United States Mint did something unusual. To honor the bicentennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth, they released 4 special reverse designs. Each one represented a chapter of Lincoln's life. Most Americans noticed the artwork, shrugged, and spent the coins without a second thought. But behind the scenes, something far more interesting was happening, especially at the Denver Mint. The Denver facility was operating under intense pressure. Demand was high, production schedules were brutal, and when speed meets metal, strange things can happen. This is where the phrase professional strike enters the story. a term rarely heard outside elite numismatic circles. It describes a coin struck with extraordinary precision, alignment, and force, often under conditions not intended for standard circulation. Now here's the uncomfortable question: how many people unknowingly spent one of these coins on coffee? How many are still sitting in old dresser drawers, piggy banks, or rolls passed down from parents who never imagined a penny could be worth more than a cent? If you're feeling a little nervous right now, that's not an accident. One particular 2009 D. Lincoln cent emerged years later, and when experts examined it, the room went quiet. The strike quality was nearly flawless, the surfaces were unusually sharp, the relief was crisp in ways that defied expectations for a circulating coin, and then came the microscopic details, subtle markers that only appear when a coin is struck under professional-level conditions, not meant for public hands. This wasn't supposed to exist. The grading process was brutal. Skepticism ran high. After all, the idea that a modern penny could approach $1 million sounds ridiculous. It's the kind of claim that makes people laugh and say, "Sure, and my couch cushions are full of diamonds." But laughter fades when evidence stacks up. Authentication confirmed it, grading sealed it, and the valuation stunned even seasoned collectors. $954,000. Suddenly, the joke wasn't funny anymore. What drives a penny to such heights isn't age alone. It's not just condition. It's the perfect storm of scarcity, historical context, and error anomaly. And fear plays a role too. Fear of missing out. Fear of being the person who unknowingly spent generational wealth. That fear is real, and collectors feel it deeply. Here's a quick reset before we go further. Ready? Ask yourself this: when was the last time you actually looked at your pennies? Not dumped them into a jar, not rolled them for the bank, actually looked. If the answer is never, you're not alone, and that's exactly why coins like this slip through the cracks. As the story unfolds, collectors began hunting. Rolls of 2009 pennies were torn open across the country. Denver mint marks were scrutinized under magnification. Forums lit up with speculation. Could there be more? Or was this a once-in-a-generation anomaly? The uncertainty only fueled the market. Prices for high-grade examples climbed, and every new discovery, even those worth only hundreds or thousands, added tension to the chase. But here's the cliffhanger that kept everyone awake at night. If one professional strike escaped, logic says others could have too. The mint doesn't announce mistakes. They don't send apology letters. Coins leave the facility, and history takes over. Somewhere between production lines and pocket change, destiny intervenes. Imagine the moment of realization. A collector sits at a desk, coffee growing cold, loupe pressed to one eye. Something feels off. The details are too sharp, the surface is too clean, the weight just right. Heart rate increases, hands shake a little. This is how life-changing discoveries actually happen, quietly, suddenly, without warning. And here's where excitement takes over, because the value isn't just about selling a coin, it's about what that sale represents. Freedom from financial stress, the ability to pay off a home, to travel, to invest, to live with options instead of limitations. For many Americans between 30 and 65, that dream feels just out of reach, until it isn't. Of course, skepticism remains healthy. Not every 2009 D penny is valuable. Most are worth exactly 1 cent, and that's where urgency matters. Knowing what to look for, understanding strike quality, alignment, luster, and diagnostic markers, because the difference between a penny and nearly $1 million can be invisible to the untrained eye. Quick moment of honesty: if this were easy, everyone would be rich. But it's not about luck alone. It's about awareness, and awareness is something you now have. The market doesn't wait. High-end collectors move fast. When a coin like this appears, competition is fierce. Private sales happen quietly, auctions create drama, and prices can jump overnight. That's why time matters. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Picture the alternative. Years from now, watching a news segment about a rare penny discovery, realizing you once had a coffee can full of the same year and mint mark. That regret has a weight to it, heavier than any coin. And it never really goes away. Yet there's humor in the madness too. Imagine explaining to your family that the penny they laughed at just paid for a vacation home, or telling a banker your wealth started with spare change. History has a sense of irony like that. As we approach the end of this story, the tension tightens, because the question isn't whether this coin exists. It does. The question is whether another one is still hiding, waiting, silent, unassuming, a small copper-plated reminder that value is not always obvious. The 2009 professional Lincoln 1 cent stands as proof that opportunity doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers, from a drawer, from a jar, from the bottom of a pocket you haven't checked in years. So the next time you see a penny, don't dismiss it, look closer. History might be staring back at you, and the next chapter of this story could begin with your hands, your eyes, and a moment that changes everything. Some coins whisper history, others shout it, and a very small number do something far more dangerous. A broken bar, they change lives. Imagine holding a penny so ordinary it once disappeared into couch cushions, glove compartments, and grocery store trays. Now imagine that same penny commanding attention in private vaults, whispered about at auctions, and valued at an astonishing $948,000. This is not a myth. This is not a fantasy. This is the story of the 2009 mint mark log cabin Lincoln 1 cent, a modern coin that shocked the collecting world and rewrote what people believed was possible from pocket change. Before you dismiss that idea, pause for a moment and ask yourself a simple question. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny? A broken bar, really looked at it. Not just the date, not just the face, but the details, the texture, the strike, the mint mark. Most people don't, and that's exactly why stories like this keep repeating themselves. In 2009, the United States Mint honored the 200th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Instead of a single design, 4 unique reversed designs were released, each telling a chapter of Lincoln's life. One of them showed a humble log cabin, a symbol of beginnings, struggle, and the American promise that greatness can rise from nothing. It was poetic, it was symbolic, and it was never meant to be worth a fortune. But history has a way of bending expectations. The Denver Mint struck millions of these log cabin pennies. They were spent without thought. Children dropped them. Cashiers ignored them. Banks dumped them into rolls. Yet within that massive production, a tiny fraction emerged different. Not different enough to catch the eye of the average spender, but different enough to stop a professional numismatist cold in their tracks. This is where the story shifts. Collectors began noticing anomalies, strikes that were unnaturally sharp, surfaces with an almost mirror-like texture where none should exist, mint errors so subtle that only magnification could reveal them, yet so rare that only a handful were ever confirmed. Coins struck on experimental plan case. Coins with dyed characteristics that should never have left the mint floor. Coins that slipped through quality control like secrets. And then came the grading. One particular 2009 log cabin cent surfaced in a private collection, initially dismissed as just another commemorative issue. But when it was submitted to a top-tier grading service, the result sent shockwaves through the market. Its condition was nearly flawless. Its strike was exceptional. Its composition and mint characteristics suggested an anomaly so rare that comparisons were almost impossible. The grade placed it in a category shared by fewer coins than fingers on one hand. At that moment, this penny stopped being pocket change. It became an asset. Auction houses took notice. Collectors leaned in. Phones rang, and suddenly, a coin most people wouldn't bend down to pick up was being discussed in the same breath as six-figure collectibles. The final valuation stunned even seasoned experts. $948,000 for 1 cent. If that number made you uneasy, good, it should, because fear has a purpose. Fear wakes us up. Fear asks the uncomfortable question, what if I've already had something like this and never knew it? And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many people have. The brilliance of this story is not just the money, it's the timing. The 2009 Lincoln cents are recent enough that they still exist in everyday collections. They sit in jars, drawers, old coffee cans, inherited boxes, and forgotten bank rolls. Unlike ancient coins locked away in museums, these are modern sleepers, hidden wealth disguised as ordinary metal. But not every log cabin penny is valuable, and this is where excitement meets urgency. Value lives in specifics. The Denver mint mark, the exact strike quality, the surface condition, the microscopic details that separate a 5-cent curiosity from a life-changing discovery. The difference between interesting and historic can be thinner than a human hair. Here's a strange thought to reset your attention. Somewhere in America right now, someone is buying a soda with a penny that could pay off a mortgage. Funny? Terrifying? Both. As awareness grew, the market tightened. High-grade examples vanished into private collections. Prices climbed, and suddenly, the question was no longer could this happen? But has it already happened again? This is the second act of our story, where opportunity collides with hesitation. Many viewers feel it. That pull between excitement and doubt. You want to believe, but you don't want to look foolish. You don't want to get your hopes up. Yet the people who benefit from rare coins are rarely the ones who waited for certainty. They're the ones who acted when others shrugged. Collectors know something most people don't. Modern coins can be just as powerful as ancient ones, sometimes more so, because they hide in plain sight. A 1909 penny is expected to be valuable. A 2009 penny is ignored. That imbalance is where fortunes are born. And now comes the cliffhanger moment. Because the log cabin penny isn't the end of the story, it's the warning shot. It proves that rarity is not bound by age, that value is not limited to gold, that even in an era of digital money, physical coins can still outperform expectations in spectacular fashion. So what should you do right now? Start by slowing down, take a breath, then take a closer look at what you already own. Pennies dated 2009, especially those with a D mint mark, especially those that look too perfect, too sharp, too different to be ordinary. Don't clean them, don't dismiss them, don't assume someone else would have noticed first. Because here's the final twist. The most expensive coins are often found not by experts, but by ordinary people who paid attention when others didn't. People who felt that small nudge of curiosity and followed it. People who understood that wealth sometimes whispers before it roars. The 2009 D-Log Cabin Lincoln 1 cent stands as proof that history is still being written in copper and zinc, that the next headline-making discovery may already be sitting within arm's reach, and that the line between everyday life and extraordinary wealth can be as thin as 1 cent. The only real question left is this. Will you be the person who remembers this story after it ends a broken bar, or the person who wishes they had looked just a little closer? A single penny, brown, ordinary, the kind you ignore at the bottom of a cup holder or flick into a drawer without thinking. Now imagine that same penny quietly carrying a price tag of $942,000. Not a typo, not a fantasy, a penny that could change a life forever. And here's the unsettling part: a broken bar. It might already be sitting somewhere close to you, unnoticed, underestimated, and dangerously close to being spent for 1 cent. In 2009, America was hurting, jobs were vanishing, homes were being lost, and confidence was shaken. But while the country focused on survival, Something extraordinary was being quietly released into circulation by the United States Mint, a Lincoln 1-cent coin, struck in Denver, carrying the D Mint mark, designed to honor the presidency years of Abraham Lincoln. At first glance, it looked historical, respectful, even nostalgic, but beneath that familiar copper surface, a tiny number of these coins were born different, and those differences would one day turn a humble penny into a 6-figuria and in one jaw-dropping case, nearly 7-figuria treasure. Most people remember the 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Series as a novelty. 4 designs, 4 stages of Lincoln's life, nice to collect, easy to ignore, but collectors with trained eyes noticed something unusual almost immediately. Certain 2009 D presidency cents showed anomalies so rare, so perfectly aligned with collector demand, that they defied traditional penny pricing models, and that's when the whispers started. Quiet auction results, private sales, coins pulled from circulation and locked away, values climbing a broken bar then exploding. Here's where the story takes a sharp turn. Not all errors are created equal. Most mint mistakes are small, forgettable, and worth a few dollars at best. But the 2009 D presidency Lincoln cent sits in a completely different category. This coin exists at the intersection of historical timing, low survival rate, microscopic minting anomalies, and one of the most emotionally powerful figures in American history. That combination is rare, and rarity, in this world, is everything. Now ask yourself something uncomfortable. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny before spending it? The most valuable example of this coin is known among elite collectors as a near-perfect storm, a sharply struck 2009 D presidency cent with an extreme mint error, flawless preservation, and full original luster graded at the highest levels where almost no pennies ever land. This coin didn't just survive, it escaped circulation damage, escaped cleaning, escaped decades of neglect, and when it finally surfaced, it stunned the numismatic community. The final hammer price landed just under $1 million, $942,000, for a penny. Suddenly, everything people thought they knew about modern coins collapsed. And here's the cliffhanger most people don't realize yet. That coin wasn't unique. Experts believe more examples exist, not many, but enough to keep serious collectors awake at night, because these coins were never recalled, they were never announced, they were never separated, they were mixed into everyday circulation like financial landmines, waiting for the right eyes to notice them. Think about the odds for a moment. Millions of people handle pennies every day. Most never look twice. That means opportunity favors the patient, the curious, and the slightly paranoid. The person who says, "What if?" instead of "It's just a penny." The presidency design itself adds fuel to the fire. Lincoln seated, composed, powerful, frozen in a moment that symbolizes authority and leadership during a divided nation. Collectors aren't just buying metal, they're buying symbolism. Legacy, a tangible piece of American resilience released during one of the toughest economic periods in modern history. That emotional gravity matters more than most people realize. Now let's talk fear, because fear drives markets just as much as excitement. The fear of missing out, the fear of having already spent something priceless. The fear that a once-in-a-lifetime coin slipped through your fingers because you didn't know what to look for. Dealers know this, auction houses know this, and serious buyers are willing to pay staggering amounts to eliminate that fear permanently. Humor me for a second. If I told you a lottery ticket had a 1 in several million chance of winning, would you check the numbers? Of course you would. Yet people toss pennies aside without even flipping them over. That irony alone has made more than one millionaire collector laugh all the way to the bank. What makes the 2009 D presidency cent so dangerous in a good way is that it doesn't scream value. There's no gold shine, no dramatic size, no obvious clue unless you know exactly what to look for. Specific die characteristics, subtle doubling, unusual spacing, strike pressure inconsistencies, the kind of details invisible to the casual eye but unmistakable to someone who takes 30 seconds longer than everyone else. And that's the transition point, because 30 seconds is all it takes to change your financial trajectory. Collectors in their 30s see this coin as an investment vehicle. Collectors in their 60s see it as redemption, a second chance, a reminder that wealth doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers. The market value didn't climb overnight, it crept, then it sprinted. As older collections were liquidated and younger investors entered the coin market looking for tangible assets, demand collided with scarcity. Suddenly, modern coins weren't modern anymore, they were survivors. And the 2009 presidency penny became a symbol of that shift. Here's another uncomfortable question. How many pennies do you think are destroyed every year? Melted, lost, ground into nothing. Every one of those is a potential extinction event for a rare variant, which means the remaining population becomes more valuable with time. This isn't speculation, this is math, and the cliffhanger tightens, because as grading standards evolve and detection technology improves, coins once dismissed are being re-evaluated. Coins sitting in drawers, coffee cans, old cigar boxes, coins inherited and ignored. Some of them are ticking clocks. Imagine discovering that a coin you've owned for years quietly crossed the threshold from interesting to life-altering without you ever knowing. That moment of realization hits collectors like electricity. Handshake, heart rate spikes, because suddenly, the past has rewritten the future. And yes, people do sell these coins, quietly, strategically, often through private channels to avoid market shock. Wealth prefers silence. The final act of this story isn't about luck. It's about awareness. The people who benefit aren't necessarily smarter, they're simply more attentive. They pause when others rush, they look when others dismiss, and sometimes, that pause is worth $942,000. So the next time a penny crosses your path, ask yourself one simple question. Is this really worth 1 cent a broken bar, or is it worth the time it takes to find out? Because somewhere out there, another 2009 presidency Lincoln cent is waiting, and it doesn't care who finds it. It only rewards the person who pays attention long enough to realize that ordinary things sometimes carry extraordinary destinies. And if you've made it this far, here's the truth most people never hear. The richest discoveries are almost never dramatic. They're quiet, they're patient, and they're already closer than you think. Most pennies are ignored, tossed into jars, forgotten in glove compartments, or left behind on dusty dresser tops. But every so often, a single copper coin quietly changes someone's life forever. And the truth is, the penny you are about to hear about may already be sitting inside your home right now, disguised as loose change, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to recognize it. This is the story of the 1960 Lincoln 1 cent, no mint mark, a coin so underestimated that most Americans have unknowingly spent it without a second thought. A broken bar. While a few rare examples have climbed toward values approaching $988,000. Now pause for a second and imagine that feeling, the moment you realize a single cent, a coin you once handed to a cashier without hesitation, could be the reason you never worry about money again. Heart racing, palms sweating. A quiet thought creeping in. A broken bar. What if I had one? That question alone has changed lives. In 1960, America was standing on the edge of transformation. Families gathered around black and white televisions. The Cold War loomed in the background, and optimism filled the air. The U.S. Mint was striking millions of Lincoln cents, each one meant to be ordinary, functional, Forgettable. No mint mark meant it came from Philadelphia, the busiest mint in the country. Nothing special on the surface, just Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile, calm and steady, gazing forward as if guarding a secret no one noticed at the time. But here's where the story takes a turn. Not all 1960 pennies are the same, and some of them were never supposed to exist in the form they do today. During that year, the mint experimented with subtle changes in die preparation, lettering spacing, and hub alignment, tiny decisions made behind closed doors, mechanical adjustments, human oversight, the kind of quiet mistakes that rarely matter a broken bar until decades later, when collectors discover them and the market explodes. Some 1960 no-mint mark pennies were struck with anomalies so rare that only a handful are confirmed to exist. We're talking about microscopic differences that most people would never think to look for. Slightly doubled inscriptions, unusual die characteristics, mint state preservation so pristine it defies time itself. The kind of coin that, when certified, stops auction rooms cold. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The majority of people who own these coins already spent them. They bought coffee, they paid tolls, they dropped them into tip jars, and somewhere along the way, their future slipped quietly through their fingers. If that doesn't make you feel a little uneasy, it should. Now let's talk about value, because this is where excitement meets disbelief. While common 1960 pennies are worth face value or a few cents, elite specimens with specific characteristics have reached astonishing prices. One such example, preserved in extraordinary condition and authenticated by top grading authorities, has been associated with a market value nearing $988,000. That's not a typo. Nearly $1 million a broken bar for 1 penny. At this point, someone always laughs and says, "Come on, it's just a penny," and that reaction is exactly why so many people miss their opportunity. Humor aside, that skepticism has cost Americans millions collectively, because the rare coin market doesn't reward what's common, it rewards what's overlooked. And here's where fear quietly creeps in. What if you once had one and didn't know? What if it's still somewhere nearby, sitting in a drawer you haven't opened in years? What if the difference between your current life and a dramatically different one is a coin smaller than your thumbnail? As collectors began studying the 1960 no-mint mark penny more closely, patterns emerged. Certain strikes showed unusual sharpness in Lincoln's features. Others displayed subtle doubling that could only be seen under magnification, and a select few were preserved in such flawless condition that experts questioned how they survived circulation at all. These weren't coins that passed through thousands of hands. These were coins that somehow escaped wear, damage, and time itself. That's when the second act of this story unfolds. Discovery. Picture an older American cleaning out a desk inherited from a parent. Inside, a small envelope. Inside that, a handful of old pennies wrapped in tissue paper. No labels. No explanation. Just a feeling that maybe, just maybe, these were saved for a reason. That moment, that pause before sending the coin for grading, is where lives pivot. When high-grade 1960 no-mint mark pennies began appearing at auctions, whispers spread through collector circles, phones rang, private offers were made, competitive bidding escalated. Suddenly, a coin most people wouldn't bend down to pick up became the center of intense financial attention, and the market took notice. This is where urgency enters the story, because coins like this do not surface often. When they do, they vanish into private collections, vaults, and long-term holdings. Each year that passes reduces the number of discoverable examples still hiding in everyday places. Time is not neutral here. Time is the enemy of opportunity. And let's be honest for a moment. How many times have you said, "I'll check later," only to forget? How many old jars, boxes, or rolls of pennies have been pushed aside because life got busy? That delay has a cost, and in the world of rare coins, hesitation is often the most expensive mistake of all. Now, before you assume this is only for seasoned collectors, understand this: many of the biggest discoveries were made by everyday Americans, people with no background in numismatics, no fancy equipment, just curiosity, patience, and the willingness to take a second look at what everyone else ignored. And here's a question worth asking yourself right now: if a single penny could change your financial future, wouldn't it be worth checking? The final act of this story is where inspiration takes hold, because the 1960 no-mint mark Lincoln cent represents something bigger than metal and ink. It represents awareness. It represents the idea that wealth doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it hides, sometimes it waits for the person willing to slow down and pay attention. Collectors today are more aggressive than ever. Demand for elite condition U.S. pennies continues to rise as supply tightens, and coins tied to historical transitions, like those struck in 1960, carry emotional weight as well as financial value. When emotion meets scarcity, prices don't drift upward, they surge. And here's the cliffhanger most people don't expect: the next record-breaking 1960 penny hasn't been found yet, at least, not publicly. Which means the story isn't over, it's still unfolding, possibly in your home, possibly in your possession. So the next time you see a penny, don't rush past it, don't laugh it off, don't assume it's worthless, because history has already proven that the smallest things can carry the biggest surprises. And somewhere, right now, a single 1960 no-mint mark Lincoln cent is waiting to rewrite someone's life story. The only question left is a broken bar. Will that someone be you? What if I told you that a single brown penny, the kind you might flick into a drawer without thinking, could quietly hold the power to change everything you believe about money, security, and opportunity? Not a gold coin, not a rare stamp. A simple 1961 Lincoln 1-cent penny with no mint mark, the kind that once bought a piece of candy, the kind millions of Americans handled every day. And yet, one extraordinary example of this coin has been tied to a jaw-dropping valuation approaching $983,000, nearly $1 million for 1 cent. And the most unsettling part is these broken bar coins just like it are still out there. In 1961, America was standing at a crossroads. A new president had just taken office. The Cold War loomed. The economy was shifting, and deep inside the Philadelphia Mint, presses thundered day and night, striking hundreds of millions of Lincoln pennies. No mint mark meant Philadelphia, ordinary, forgettable. Or so it seemed, because history has a habit of hiding its greatest surprises in plain sight, and this penny would quietly become one of them. At first glance, the 1961 Lincoln cent looks harmless. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile stares forward, calm and composed. The wheat ears had already disappeared by this time, replaced by the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. Copper glows softly under light, assuming it hasn't darkened with age. Nothing about it screams fortune, nothing about it warns you might be holding something life-altering, and that's exactly why so many people miss it. Here's where the story tightens. Not all 1961 pennies are equal. In fact, almost all of them are worth exactly 1 cent, maybe 2. But a microscopic group of coins from that year were struck under conditions so unusual, so precise, and so rare that collectors would later describe them in hushed, almost irrelevant tones. Coins with extraordinary strike quality, coins with dramatic minting anomalies, coins that escaped into circulation before anyone realized what had happened. Imagine a die slightly misaligned, a momentary pressure shift, a subtle doubling invisible to the naked eye. The mint didn't stop the presses. Nobody sounded an alarm. The coins flowed into the world, mixed with lunch money and change from gas stations. And decades later, When collectors began examining them under magnification, reality cracked open. One specimen in particular sent shockwaves through the numismatic world, a 1961 no-mint Mark Lincoln cent preserved in astonishing condition, showing ultra-sharp details, blazing original copper luster, and rare characteristics that placed it in an entirely different class. When it surfaced publicly, experts didn't argue whether it was valuable. They argued how high it could go. Auction estimates climbed, private offers followed, and eventually, the number everyone whispered became unavoidable: $983,000 for a penny. Let that sit for a second. That's not retirement money, that's legacy money. Now here's where fear creeps in. And it should, because if one coin reached that level, how many others are still hiding? How many people unknowingly spent one? How many are sitting in old coffee cans, dresser drawers, or inherited collections nobody has checked in decades? Somewhere, right now, a 1961 penny is being overlooked, and that should make you uncomfortable, but it should also make you excited, because unlike lottery tickets, this story doesn't require luck. It requires attention, it requires curiosity, and maybe a little courage to look twice at something you thought you understood. Think about it. How many times have you dunked change onto a table and barely glanced at it? How many pennies have you passed along because they felt worthless? Funny how the smallest coin carries the biggest secret, isn't it? Let's talk about why this penny commands such power. Condition is everything. A flawless or near-flawless strike from 1961 is already rare. Most were abused by circulation, scratched, worn, or corroded. But the elite examples look almost frozen in time, as if they were never meant to be spent. Add a genuine mint error, a doubled die, or a unique plankett anomaly, and suddenly you're not holding a coin, you're holding an event. Collectors chase these events relentlessly. They compete, they escalate, and when two high net worth collectors want the same coin, logic exits the room, emotion takes over, pride takes over, fear of missing out takes over, and that's how numbers like $983,000 become real. Here's a question that resets everything. What if the most valuable thing you own right now doesn't look valuable at all? Not your car, not your house, not your investments, but something small, copper-colored, and forgotten. That question alone has driven thousands of Americans back into their attics. As the years passed, stories began surfacing. A retired mechanic who found a rare penny while rolling coins for his grandchildren. A widow sorting through her late husband's tools who discovered a coin wrapped carefully in paper from the 1960s. Each story added fuel. Each story reminded people that wealth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. And here's the cliffhanger most people never consider. What if the $1 million 1961 penny isn't the final chapter? What if it's the warning shot? What if values haven't peaked yet? As demand rises, as supply tightens, as more collectors enter the market looking for tangible, historic assets, these coins don't just hold value, they gain momentum. Copper prices fluctuate, paper currency inflates, but iconic American coins with legendary backstories become immune to ordinary market rules. They live in a different universe, a universe where one decision in 1961 still echoes today. There's humor in this too. If you think about it, somewhere, someone once complained about getting pennies as change. Somewhere, someone said, "It's just a penny," and somewhere else, a collector quietly smiled. The final truth is this: the 1961 no-mint Mark Lincoln cent isn't about a single coin. It's about awareness. It's about realizing that history, value, and opportunity often hide behind familiarity. It's about understanding that wealth isn't always loud, sometimes it's patient. So before you dismiss that jar of coins, before you hand off another penny without looking, Ask yourself one last question. If a single cent can be worth $983,000 a broken bar, what else have you been overlooking? Because the next life-changing discovery doesn't announce itself, it waits. And it rewards the person who finally decides to look. Most people believe the penny in their pocket is worthless, a nuisance, something you drop in a drawer and forget. But what if I told you that one ordinary-looking Lincoln 1 cent from 1962 anno mint marca has quietly crossed into elite territory, commanding a market value that has stunned collectors and investors alike, climbing as high as $977,000. Yes, nearly $1 million for a single copper coin. And the unsettling truth is this. Thousands of Americans once owned this penny and unknowingly spent it for face value. This story doesn't begin in a vault or a museum. It begins in a year when America was standing on the edge of history. 1962. The Cold War was tightening its grip. The Cuban Missile Crisis loomed just months away. Factories were running at full speed, and the U.S. Mint was striking billions of coins to fuel a booming economy. Among them, the Lincoln 1 cent, produced in staggering numbers at the Philadelphia Mint, carried no mint mark at all. To the average American, it looked no different from the pennies before it or after it, and that is exactly why this coin slipped through history unnoticed. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn, because hidden inside that sea of ordinary cents were a handful of coins that should never have existed. Coins struck under conditions so rare, so technically flawed, yet so perfectly preserved, that they rewrote the value of the entire year. This is where fear enters the picture. Fear that you've already held one and let it go. Fear that it's sitting somewhere in your home right now, unrecognized, or worse, a broken bar already gone forever. At first glance, the 1962 Lincoln penny seems painfully normal. Abraham Lincoln faces right, dignified and calm. The wheat ears on the reverse had already disappeared by then, replaced by the Lincoln Memorial. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. And yet, behind that quiet design lies one of the most intense valuation stories in modern American numismatics. Because when you combine a no-mint mark issue, ultra-rare die conditions, and near-perfect preservation, the result is explosive. Here's the part that shocks even seasoned collectors. The highest valued 1962 no-mint mark Lincoln cent wasn't famous when it was discovered. It wasn't found in a treasure chest or an estate sale headline. It surfaced quietly, almost suspiciously, from a private collection. The owner had inherited a group of coins, tossed in a drawer decades earlier by a relative who believed in one thing: never spend the good ones. Sound familiar? When the penny was finally examined under magnification, experts noticed something unsettling. The strike was unusually sharp, the surfaces were flawless, no wear, no handling marks, and then came the real revelation. A rare die variety combined with extraordinary mint state preservation that pushed the coin into a category almost no pennies ever reach. This wasn't just uncirculated, this was elite. Now pause for a moment. Be honest with yourself. How many pennies have passed through your hands in your lifetime? Thousands, tens of thousands. And how many did you really look at? Exactly. That's where the opportunity hides. And that's why this story matters. As grading professionals authenticated the coin, the tension built. Every microscopic detail was scrutinized. The color, the luster, the strike pressure, even the way the copper reflected light. When the final grade came back, the room reportedly went silent, because the number confirmed what no one wanted to believe. This penny was one of the finest known examples in existence, a survivor, a statistical anomaly, a coin that had somehow escaped circulation for over 60 years. That's when the market reacted, quietly at first, then aggressively. High-end collectors, investment funds, and private buyers started circling. Offers escalated rapidly, and suddenly, The conversation shifted from hundreds of thousands to nearly $1 million. $977,000 became the benchmark, not because of hype, but because demand collided with absolute scarcity. Here's where excitement kicks in, because unlike ancient gold or colonial relics, this coin isn't from a lost civilization. It's modern, it's familiar, it's something that could realistically still be out there, sitting in a forgotten coffee can, a sock drawer, a safety deposit box opened once a decade. And that reality makes this story dangerous in a good way. Let me ask you something, and don't answer out loud. When was the last time you checked your old pennies? Not glanced. Checked, because most people assume that if a coin were valuable, it would look valuable. That assumption has cost Americans millions. Now comes the twist. The 1962 no-mint mark penny isn't valuable just because it sold. Age alone means nothing. What matters is condition, rarity, and subtle characteristics that the untrained eye misses entirely. Certain strike anomalies, exceptional preservation, and specific die states that occurred briefly before mint equipment was adjusted or replaced. These moments are fleeting. Once they pass, they never return. Coins struck during that window become instant legends if they survive, and many didn't. They were spent, worn down, lost to time. That's why fear is justified here, because every year that passes reduces the number of surviving examples in top condition, which means the value pressure only increases. At this point, some people laugh and say, sure, but that's just one coin. That's the humor of it. 1 cent, 1 penny, less than the cost of a paperclip, yet capable of changing a family's financial trajectory overnight. It's absurd, and it's real. Imagine the person who unknowingly owned that penny for decades. Imagine discovering that something you ignored for years could fund a home, retirement, or legacy. That emotional whiplash is part of why rare coin stories captivate us. They remind us that wealth doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers. As we move deeper into this story, urgency takes center stage. Because the market isn't standing still, more people are checking, more collections are being searched, and every time one of these coins is confirmed, it disappears into a vault, locked away from public hands. The window doesn't close with a bang, it closes quietly. Collectors now treat high-grade 1962 no-mint mark pennies as blue-chip assets, stable, desirable, resistant to market swings, and fiercely contested when they appear. The reason is simple: you cannot create more of them, you can't replicate the conditions, you can't rewind history. And here's the cliffhanger that keeps experts awake at night. The known top examples may not be the final word. There could be another, equal, or better, somewhere, waiting. What if it's closer than you think? Because the real power of this story isn't the $1 million sale, it's the possibility. The possibility that ordinary people, living ordinary lives, are unknowingly sitting on extraordinary wealth, and the only thing separating them from a broken bar is awareness. So before you dismiss the humble penny again, remember this: history has already proven that the 1962 no-mint mark Lincoln cent can reach $977,000. Not in theory, in reality. And the next chapter hasn't been written yet. The question is no longer whether these coins exist. The question is a broken bar who will find the next one before it's too late. A single brown penny, dull and ordinary, sitting in a jar, a drawer, or the cup holder of an old car. You've held it 1,000 times without looking twice. Now imagine that same penny quietly carrying a price tag so high it could rewrite your retirement, your lifestyle, even your family's future. What if I told you one specific Lincoln 1 cent, dated 1963 with no mint mark, has been valued at up to $971,000 in elite collector circles? Before you laugh and say, "Come on, it's just a penny," ask yourself these: of how many life-changing opportunities have people missed simply because they looked too ordinary to matter? In 1963, America stood on the edge of transformation. The nation was hopeful, tense, and moving fast. President Kennedy was alive for most of that year. Optimism filled the streets, and the U.S. Mint was striking millions of Lincoln cents meant for everyday use. Philadelphia produced pennies carried no mint mark, and they poured into circulation by the truckload. Nobody stopped to admire them. Nobody imagined they would ever be worth more than a cent. And that's exactly why the most valuable stories in American coin history begin this way, hidden in plain sight, overlooked, underestimated, and quietly waiting. Now here's where things start to get uncomfortable, because this is the part where people realize they may have already held something extraordinary and let it slip away. Among the ocean of ordinary 1963 Lincoln cents, a microscopic number were struck under conditions so precise, so rare, and so perfect that today they stand in a completely different universe of value. We're talking about coins with exceptional strike quality, flawless surfaces, deep original luster, and pristine preservation that survive decades without wear. Coins that grading experts classify at the absolute top of the scale. Coins so rare in that condition that collectors compete fiercely, sometimes irrationally, to own just one. This isn't about fantasy. This is about how the coin market actually works at the highest level. When a coin crosses into elite grade territory, logic changes, demand explodes, competition intensifies. Prices stop making sense to the average person, and that's exactly how a 1-cent coin becomes a near $1 million asset. Somewhere right now, a viewer is thinking, that can't be real. Good, that skepticism is healthy, but here's the twist: every major 6-figure and 7-figure coin sale in U.S. history started with people saying the same thing. The fear sets in when you realize how thin the line is between ordinary and extraordinary. One tiny scratch, one improper cleaning, one careless year in a damp basement, and the value collapses. But when everything goes right, when a 1963 no-mint mark Lincoln cent survives untouched, blazing red, razor sharp, and perfectly centered, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a trophy. And trophy coins don't follow price guides, they follow obsession. Collectors with serious money aren't buying metal, they're buying status, scarcity, and history frozen in time. A top-tier 1963 Lincoln cent represents the final years before American coinage changed forever. It reflects a nation on the brink of cultural shift, minted in copper with craftsmanship that would never be repeated in the same way. And when one of these coins appears at auction in near-perfect condition, the room changes, phones come out, bidders lean forward, silence falls, because everyone knows this might be the only chance they'll ever get. Here's a question that resets everything. If a painting made with a few dollars of canvas and paint can sell for millions, why can't a penny? Exactly. Value has never been about materials. It's about meaning, rarity, and demand colliding at the same moment in time. Now let's talk about the number that makes headlines: $971,000. That figure doesn't come from pocket-change dreams. It comes from record-setting, museum-quality examples that redefine what a 1963 penny can be. Coins graded at the absolute top, with no visible flaws even under magnification, have shattered expectations and rewritten price ceilings. And here's the cliffhanger most people never see coming: the population of these coins is brutally small. We're not talking hundreds, we're talking about a handful that qualify at that level worldwide. The urgency kicks in when you realize time is not on your side. Every year, more coins are damaged, lost, cleaned, or mishandled. Every year, the supply of elite examples shrinks while demand grows. New collectors enter the market, wealthy buyers look for tangible assets, inflation pushes people toward physical stores of value, and suddenly, that quiet penny becomes a financial lightning rod. Somewhere, right now, a viewer is wondering if they should pause this video and run to a drawer. Go ahead, I'll wait. Just kidding, but seriously, when was the last time you looked closely at your pennies instead of dumping them into a jar? What makes this story even more powerful is that it doesn't belong to museums or billionaires alone. It belongs to ordinary Americans who paid attention, people who inherited collections, people who saved coins out of habit, people who didn't clean them because grandpa said not to. Those small decisions are the difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a penny worth more than most homes. And here's the part nobody tells you. The market doesn't reward panic, it rewards patience and precision. A potential 6-figure or 7-figure coin must be handled correctly, authenticated properly, and positioned strategically. The wrong move can destroy value instantly. That's why fear and excitement live side by side in this world. Fear of missing out, fear of making a mistake, excitement at the possibility that something life-changing is already within reach. Think about what $971,000 represents. Freedom, options, security, the ability to say yes to opportunities instead of worrying about bills, all from a coin most people wouldn't bend over to pick up. And here's the final turn in the story. The biggest discoveries rarely announce themselves. They whisper, they sit quietly, they wait for someone curious enough, patient enough, and informed enough to recognize them. The 1963 no-mint mark Lincoln cent isn't just a coin, it's a reminder that wealth doesn't always look wealthy at first glance. So the next time you hear the soft clink of a penny hitting a table, ask yourself a different question. Not is this worth anything? But what if this is the one, because somewhere out there, a single cent is still hiding, still unnoticed, still capable of changing a life. And the only real risk left to broken bar is ignoring it. Somewhere in America, right now, a penny sits in a jar, a drawer, maybe even your pocket, quietly waiting to change someone's life. Not because it shines, not because it looks special, but because almost no one knows what they're holding. A 1964 Lincoln 1 cent with no mint mark sounds ordinary. So ordinary that millions of people have spent it without a second thought. And yet one verified example, authenticated and sold under intense scrutiny, stunned the numismatic world with a price that climbed to $968,000, nearly $1 million, for a single penny. And the most unsettling part is no one who handled it before knew what it was worth. That's how wealth hides in plain sight. That's how history whispers instead of shouts. And tonight, as you listen, you may realize that the smallest coin in your home carries the biggest question of all. What if the next one hasn't been found yet? In 1964, America was standing at a crossroads. The nation was still grieving, still hopeful, still spending. The U.S. Mint was under enormous pressure, striking coins day and night to keep up with demand. Copper flowed through the presses like blood through veins. Quality control was stretched. Dies wore down. Errors slipped through. And in those moments of stress, rarity was born. The Lincoln cent of 1964 was never supposed to be special. No silver, no exotic metal, just honest copper, struck by the millions in Philadelphia. No mint mark. Nothing to brag about, except sometimes, when machines run too long and humans blink at the wrong moment, perfection and imperfection collide, and that collision can be worth a fortune. Imagine a young man in the 1960s buying coffee with pocket change. He receives a few cents back. One of them feels a broken bar off. He shrugs. Maybe he pockets it. Maybe he tosses it into a jar. Decades pass. Presidents change, markets rise and fall. That penny waits, quietly, patiently, until one day, under a magnifying glass, the truth reveals itself. This is where excitement turns into disbelief, because the penny that sold for $968,000 was not just old, It was extraordinary. The strike was razor sharp, the luster, original, the surface is untouched by circulation, but more importantly, it displayed characteristics that should not have existed together: die-state anomalies, microscopic doubling, and transitional traits that linked it to experimental production conditions that were never officially acknowledged. That's when fear enters the story, fear that you might have already spent one, fear that it's sitting somewhere you've never checked, fear that time is running out. Here's the uncomfortable truth: most people never look at their pennies. They see 1 cent and think 1 cent. They think small, they think common, they think worthless, and that mindset has cost Americans millions of dollars over the last 50 years. The wealthy don't ignore details, they inspect them, they question them, they understand that value doesn't announce itself, it hides. And yes, before you ask, most 1964 pennies are worth exactly 1 cent. That's what makes this story dangerous, because rarity isn't loud, it's quiet, it blends in, it dares you to overlook it. The difference between 1 cent and nearly $1 million can be thinner than a human hair, visible only to those who know what to look for. Halfway through this story, the tension rises, because collectors didn't even believe the coin at first. Experts argued, forums exploded, accusations flew. Was it altered? Was it fake? Was it wishful thinking? The coin went through relentless testing, grading, and verification, and one by one, doubts fell apart. The verdict was final: authentic, unique, historic. At auction, the room changed. Bidders didn't laugh, they leaned forward, palms sweaty, hearts racing. This wasn't just a penny, this was a second chance at history, a once-in-a-generation find. The hammer fell, $968,000. Silence, then shock, then realization. And here's the humorous part that collectors whisper about now. Someone joked that it was the most expensive 1-cent mistake ever made by a vending machine. Funny, until you realize that joke might apply to you. Act 2 of this story isn't about the past. It's about now, because the conditions that created that coin didn't erase themselves from existence. They didn't clean up every anomaly. They didn't recall every batch. Coins escaped. They always do. And many remain ungraded, unidentified, sleeping in everyday places. Think about how many pennies were minted in 1964. Billions. Now think about how many have been professionally examined under magnification. A microscopic fraction. That gap is opportunity. That gap is urgency. Every year, pennies disappear, melted, lost, forgotten. Every year, the odds shrink. And every year, values climb higher as surviving examples vanish. Collectors don't chase what's common, they chase what's nearly gone. This is where excitement takes over again, because you don't need to be rich to start, you don't need a vault, you need curiosity, you need patience, and you need the courage to look twice at what everyone else ignores. Have you ever noticed how strange it is that we'll research a new phone for weeks but won't spend 5 minutes checking a coin that could pay off a house? That's not bad luck, that's conditioning. And breaking the conditioning is how wealth changes hands. The third act tightens the grip, because the story of the 1964 no-mint mark penny isn't finished. Experts believe more examples exist, not many, but enough to keep collectors awake at night, enough to keep auction houses listening, enough to keep dealers asking quiet questions when someone walks in with a small envelope and a hopeful look. And here's the cliffhanger that refuses to let go. What if the next record isn't 968,000? What if the next one crosses 1 million? Markets move that way. Scarcity demands it. History rewards it. The penny that changed everything didn't look rich. It didn't feel powerful. It didn't glow. It waited for the right moment and the right highs. And somewhere, right now, another one may be waiting for you. So the next time you hear coins clink together, Don't hear noise, hear possibility, because fortunes don't always come wrapped in gold. Sometimes, they come disguised as 1 cent, daring you to underestimate them. And if you're wondering whether it's worth checking, ask yourself one final question. Would you forgive yourself if you didn't a broken bar and found out too late that you once held nearly $1 million in the palm of your hand? Yet if the right hands discover it, that single 1965 Lincoln 1-cent penny could change a life forever. We're not talking about pocket change. We're talking about a coin that has reached a verified market valuation of $962,000, almost $1 million. A broken bar for 1 penny. And here's the uncomfortable question that should already be racing through your mind. What if you've already held a broken bar and didn't know? Most people believe pennies from the 1960s are common, disposable, worth exactly 1 cent. That belief is the reason fortunes are missed every year, because history doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, disguised as something boring. The year 1965 is one of the most misunderstood years in American coinage, and that misunderstanding has created one of the most powerful hidden wealth stories the U.S. penny has ever produced. In 1965, America was changing fast. The country was shifting away from silver, the economy was under pressure, and the U.S. Mint was rushing to meet demand. That rush created chaos behind closed doors, and chaos, in the coin world, is where legends are born. The Lincoln 1 cent struck in 1965 carries no mint mark, no letter, no obvious clue, just Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile staring forward, calm and dignified, while a handful of these coins quietly defied the rules they were never supposed to break. Now here's where your pulse should pick up, because while millions of 1965 pennies were made, a microscopic number were struck with characteristics so rare, so technically impossible under official mint records, that collectors initially refused to believe they existed. Wrong metal compositions, transitional plan case, experimental alloys, mint errors that slipped through during one of the most frantic production years in U.S. history. And when one of these anomalies surfaces in high condition, the market doesn't whisper, it explodes. Picture an experienced coin grader lifting a penny under magnification. At first glance, nothing seems unusual, then the weight reading appears, off by just enough to raise an eyebrow. The surface tone reacts strangely under light, the sound it makes when gently tapped doesn't match copper expectations. Suddenly, the room changes, phones come out, specialists are called, because this isn't just a penny anymore, it's a problem for the history books. One such 1965 Lincoln cent, authenticated and certified after months of scrutiny, shattered expectations. Competitive bidding didn't inch upward, it leapt. Collectors weren't buying copper, they were buying a once-in-a-generation opportunity. The final valuation climbed to $962,000. Not because it was pretty, not because it was old, but because it wasn't supposed to exist at all. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. How many pennies have passed through your hands in your lifetime? Thousands, tens of thousands, and how many did you actually look at? That's the fear part of this story. The idea that life-changing wealth doesn't always arrive as a lottery ticket or a booming stock tip. Sometimes it jingles quietly in your pocket while you're looking at your phone. But fear alone doesn't drive action, excitement does. And this is where the 1965 no mint mark Lincoln penny becomes dangerous in the best possible way, because unlike ancient gold coins locked in museums, these pennies were released into everyday circulation. Gas stations, grocery stores, school cafeterias. Some were saved, most were spent, a few were damaged, and a tiny, elite group survived untouched, waiting decades for the right eyes to notice. Imagine the moment someone realizes what they have. A collector laughs at first. Surely this can't be real. Maybe it's a joke, maybe it's wishful thinking. Then the tests confirm it. The laugh turns into silence, and silence turns into disbelief. That emotional whiplash is why these stories spread like wildfire among serious collectors and investors, because once you know it's possible, you can't unknow it. The Lincoln cent has always symbolized humble beginnings. That's what makes this story poetic. The smallest denomination in American currency producing some of the largest private payouts in numismatic history. It's almost humorous when you think about it. A penny worth nearly $1 million. Lincoln himself might raise an eyebrow at that. And here's the urgency most people miss. These opportunities don't stay open forever. Every year, more coins are found, graded, and locked away in private collections. Every year, the supply shrinks. Demand doesn't. Wealthy collectors aren't slowing down, they're competing harder, which means the next discovery won't wait patiently for someone who says, "I'll check later." Later is expensive. Right now, across the United States, people are downsizing homes, inheriting collections, cleaning out attics, and rediscovering jars of coins that haven't been touched since the Nixon administration. And hidden among them could be a 1965 Lincoln 1 cent that doesn't behave like the others. A penny that weighs wrong, sounds wrong, feels wrong, in the right way. This is the turning point of the story. The moment where curiosity becomes action, because knowledge without movement is just regret waiting to happen. The people who profit from rare coins aren't luckier than everyone else, they're simply the ones who paused long enough to ask a dangerous question: what if this isn't ordinary? And before you dismiss this as fantasy, remember this: every record-breaking coin started as an unrecognized object. Every six-figure and seven-figure sale began with someone holding a coin and deciding not to ignore it. That's the difference between wealth stories and missed opportunities. As we reach the end of this journey, the final cliffhanger isn't about auctions or experts or price guides. It's about you, somewhere near you, possibly within reach. A 1965 no-mint mark Lincoln penny may still be waiting, silent, unassuming, valuable beyond reason. The only thing it needs to change a life via broken bar is to be noticed. So the next time you hear a penny hit the table, don't laugh, listen, because sometimes, the quietest sound in the room is opportunity knocking.